please tell me about yourself. What makes you happy?
What makes me happy? I actually get a lot of happiness of people working for a common cause, a positive cause. So when we're all growing our own food together, or for instance in our workplace, when we're all inspired together to make something better off in our workplace. So I think what makes me happy is a lot of people coming together to work to find a solution to a problem. I think that's really inspiring, and that's what makes me happy.
That's great. Now, Claudette, tell me what your work and projects are about and what are their missions.
So I actually founded the trust, or what was the fund, the charity within the aquarium in 2005, and we were only focused on Sydney Aquarium at the time, but since then we've been taken over by various companies, or the aquariums have been taken over by various companies, and now the trust, the independent charity that I set up, serves 5 sea life sites in Australia and New Zealand. So what our mission is basically to protect the oceans, using the animals that we have in our sites as ambassadors or flagships for their wild counterparts. So what are the threats facing these animals? Most of the species that we have are on the list. They're endangered or vulnerable in some way. So I look and prioritise what are those in the greatest need and figure out what kind of project we can do around that. I have to say a large part of our work is around sharks. I love sharks. But they're also probably one of the biggest at-risk groups of animals from a range of threats: overfishing, bycatch, shark finning, habitat loss. They're just being hammered. And so we work with researchers trying to find missing gaps of habits or behaviour. We might look at habitat issues. We cover off a range of research projects. So basically we've grouped them into platforms, so healthy habitats, sustainable seafood, and caring for critters. And whatever threat that we've identified around that particular species, we try and find a solution, and then we try and raise funds to address that threat. How successful we are remains to be seen.
Based on your years of experience, what is the core issue you believe we should all be helping to change?
Look, there are that many issues in the environment at the moment. I think people probably are largely unaware at the range of threats that we face, but the umbrella that hangs over all of them is climate change, without doubt. It's also the hardest to try and address. It is that big, and it is a very difficult story to tell, but it is undoubtedly the biggest issue that we're facing. We're experiencing it. All our seasons are changing. We're hearing stories of animals that are already evolving to the impacts of climate change. The other side of climate change is ocean acidification, which is the oceans are becoming more acidic as a result of excess carbon going into them. That is having untold impacts upon all our animals that have hard shells, our oysters, our shellfish, fish productivity. We don't even know what the impacts are. Sea temperature rises. So you've got oceans becoming more acidic, and they're getting warmer. So we've got animals that are turning up in places that they've not been before. So once an endemic species now in a new territory is classed as an invasive species, interacting with resident species, it's a mess. So that's the largest issue that we have to face. How we change behaviour, tell the story, is what I'm in the midst of at the moment. How do we deal with this?
And this is the bigger picture, but as part of the Sea Life Trust, Australia and New Zealand, what is the change you want to make in the world?
Look, we get Sea Life as a group globally get 20 million visitors per year. In Australia, New Zealand, we get about 5 million of that. I want to be able to have 5 million people leaving our sites with a message that it's a good thing to be doing something to help the environment. To be engaged is a good thing. To not just come in and see beautiful animals and then walk out and it's business as usual. I want people to feel moved to take as little as one action, whether it's choosing to reuse, you know, stop using plastic water bottles. That has a huge benefit on our oceans, and it's such a little action to take for one person. If we had 5 million people doing that, that's 5 million waters that are not being consumed each day. Same with coffee cups, you know, it's the scale at which we're seeing all these problems is just increasing as our population grows. So if I can have 5 million people just take one action to change in their life, that I feel is the biggest impact that I can have. Getting there is a little bit of a challenge, and I'm working through that as we go along.
And what do you get your drive from? Why do you do what you do, and why do you keep doing it? What inspires you?
I can't not do it. You can't not know once you know something. So now that I know that all these problems exist, and maybe it's my personality, maybe it's my Dutch heritage, maybe I'm just completely stubborn, but it's once you know something, you can't not know it, and it's then your choice as to whether you do something about it. And I know that, you know, I'm not the only one. There's a lot of good people out there doing some amazing things to try and help the environment, to help social causes, to help, you know, human rights issues. There's a lot of really amazing ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I think it's just, I see these animals, I see them in the wild, and I've always loved animals, and I just think that they don't have a voice, they don't get to speak. I feel like the Lorax, you know, I speak for the animals, I speak for the seas. So I think it's not a choice for me to not do something. We just have to do something, and I think it's a good and bad thing. You know, it keeps us busy. It'll keep me busy till the day I die. But at the same time, it can be incredibly frustrating when you feel like you're a lone operator. You're the only one who cares. You're the only one who keeps talking about this stuff. You're the only one who feels like you're passionate to make change. But I know that's not the case. There's a lot of good people out there.
There is. And more and more.
More and more, absolutely. And that's the thing that inspires me, is just, you know, seeing lights turn on. I just did a project recently with some kids, and when I speak to kids about the issues, they immediately want to act. And I think that's what keeps me going, is knowing that just getting everybody who wants to act together and keep the momentum going.
And just what kind of rewards do you get from working as a change maker?
I get huge rewards when I see that someone has changed for the better, or made a positive change in their life, having had some kind of interaction with me. So they've taken the information, or they've watched me do what I do and been inspired by that enough to make a change. Particularly inspiring is when you talk to kids, and I just said before, when I talk to, I've done a project with some children, and I showed them a picture of a seabird that had all that plastic in its stomach, and I didn't have to say another thing, and they immediately got activated about what they could do to solve that problem. And I think that is incredibly powerful and empowering. That's what keeps me going. That's what drives, I'm sure, all of us, is when we see that level of response, you know, and it's all about education. The more we talk about this stuff with people who may or may not have come across it before, the more chance there is that we can speed up the solutions, or implementing the solutions. So I think it's just, yeah, it's seeing people who actually respond to what it is that you're doing or what it is that you're saying.
So what are the things you have managed to change that you're most proud of?
I think for me, you know, upon reflection, it feels like it's such a long, hard slog, because it is person by person, you know, plastic by plastic, seafood by seafood. But I think it's the fact that I've actually created this entity out of nothing. You know, I started with no computer, no phone, no access, no money, no skills, no idea of what I was doing. I had just graduated from university, and I've turned this into a charity that now serves 5 sea life sites, We've contributed over $600,000 to projects worth over $2 million. We've engaged, an entire postcode of kids to reduce their plastic water bottle use. So I think although it feels like you may not be getting as far as you want to go at the pace that you want to go. I think when I look back on reflection, I've created something out of nothing with no idea. I had no idea what I was doing, and now I think I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm learning as I go, and I get I get a lot of learning from my people that I work with, so who I collaborate with, who I cooperate with, other organisations, people like yourself. It's pretty pleased when I look back.
Yeah, it's a huge achievement.
Yeah, I said it doesn't come very often, but when you reflect, it's I think we're getting there.
What kind of support do you have when you face a challenge? Who backs you up? I think that's where I've struggled with, is that I haven't felt as though I've had much support when I have faced challenges, and this is a very challenging job. You're trying to solve big problems with large amounts of people by yourself, effectively. So I have not felt as though there's been support, certainly directly within the space that I work, but when I look to some of the organisations I work alongside, I think that's where I get the support, to see what others are doing, to see how they're dealing with the challenges, how they're communicating. But that's something that I have actually struggled with, I suppose, is that feeling of support. And so it's just trying to reach out and find who's working alongside you, and having that humanity to be able to say that you're struggling. I've started doing that a little bit, because you can get a little bit overwhelmed when you're working in such a challenging, you're confronted by the world's problems every day, and that can get a little bit much. So just being able to reach out, I suppose. So that will make it easier?
Well, it does, because you hear that other people are also struggling, and that's not necessarily the answer that you want, but I think it's understanding that these are huge challenges and they're a lot for people to take on, especially when you are engaged, and I think to not get stopped by them, but to try and learn and grow to be able to find a way around them, so that you get through when you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, or when you're feeling like you're not getting the answers or making the change, to not get put off by that.
What is the piece of advice you wish you would have gotten when you started your journey as a change maker?
I think the piece of advice I would probably like to have received is that patience is probably the best virtue in this journey, because things don't happen as fast as you'd like them to happen, knowing how urgent some of these issues are. And the longer that I'm doing what I'm doing, I realise that it's a timing thing, you just have to be patient. You have to work within political cycles. You have to work within education cycles even. So I think it's that patience to understand that it won't always be like this, that things will change, and hopefully they change for the better. And also maybe some humour, to just keep a sense of humour, because it does get fairly heavy sometimes, and I think, it's to try and still live a good life, even though you're fighting some pretty big battles. You're trying to save your planet. And I think that's where like minds come together. Talking about that inspiration before, when you see good people working together for a common goal, a good common goal, and having fun. You can still have fun while you're trying to save the planet. So maybe it's a bit of that.
That is a good piece of wisdom, actually. Do you think your journey would have been different if you knew this before? If someone would have told you this before? I think when I first started, I was very serious because I was starting to gauge, and when you see animals affected, when you see, you know, overfishing on the scale that we're overfishing, when you see the issues firsthand, you can get very serious. You can become a bit of a ranter. You know, you want to change the world. You want to talk to everybody about it. You want to get people to change quickly. And I think, you know, you can put a few people off. You can be. I know I was a bit full on, and I think, you know, diplomacy, working out the right time and the right place, and although it's, you know, there's still that sense of urgency, you're going to get the same outcome. You know, if you're too full on and people aren't ready for you, they're not going to change. But if you try and win them over and maybe make them laugh and get them to like you or whatever it is, you might have a better chance. So I think, yeah, I think just sort of relax and I was probably a bit full on at the outset, and I can still be, you know, when I get really angry.
So if you had one piece of advice to someone just starting out, what would it be?
Learn how the political system works. Because I really didn't, and I actually followed, again, on some campaigns of some really politically engaged organisations who are lobbying and work on that sort of political front. Just working out how our politics works is a good start. Who's in your seat? Which way does the wind blow for them? You know, I was just thinking that things would change once people worked out what the problem was. Actually not. Some change comes from the ground up. A lot of it comes from the top down, and I think working out how that politics works is probably quite important, because that can maybe make some of the decisions that you make change around your campaigning or around your lobbying or around the push that you're trying to create behind your change. So I think that's probably a good place to start, and I think it doesn't hurt anybody to learn how a political system works. You know, you might vote differently if you were more engaged in what's going on around you.
That's great advice.
Oh, thank you.
A barrier for people wanting to become change makers lies on the difficulty of financially supporting themselves and their projects. What would be your advice?
Look, I'm in the red every week. I certainly don't do this for the money, and I wouldn't be able to do it if I didn't have a really supportive husband, to be honest. I think there's more opportunities for people to actually earn a living being a change maker with the growth of entrepreneurialism. So the social enterprise space is growing. The general feel of shared value amongst companies is growing, and all of those create opportunities for people who want to live an ethical and moral life making a life out of making change. There's opportunities out there, but you have to work hard to create them or find them or make them and make them viable. That's a really tough question. Looking at a whole bunch of colleagues who are extremely qualified scientists who are not working in the field within which they studied. I just know through where I am now, I worked really hard to get paid, and get paid, you know, a wage that was vaguely acceptable, but I'm still nowhere near what, you know, the skills that my job does, what they would be earning in the marketplace. They're not equitable. So I think that's a tough call. I think, you know, where there's a will, there's a way, and I really believe that, and I think passion will, without sounding trite, I think passion creates opportunities. And I think there are opportunities out there, but I think it takes a lot of determination to make those opportunities real. But not to be put off, because I think there are amazing people out there who are willing to do that. You know, it just means they have to live in their parents' garage for a little longer.
Sounds fun. Let's imagine for a moment that you're in a position of power, like a mayor or a minister. What policies would you put in place?
Renewable energy target stays. We increase it. we reinstate the emissions trading scheme. Those two policies alone were already having an impact upon our carbon emissions. They were creating jobs through new technologies. They were reducing our pollution. They were putting the onus on polluters to change their ways. It was working. Those are the two things that I would immediately do. I would make solar energy economically accessible to everybody through microcredit, through long-term loans. And I think with those two things, or three things, I think we would go a long way to starting to turn the ship around. And I think our economies would start to readjust. So you would see a whole bunch of new industries starting to flow on from those industries. And I think it would change the way that we actually do business. It would set the tone of the kind of economy that we want. Because it's a shared economy. It's not just about profit. It's about how we can add value to the environment, add value to our social systems, add value in a whole range of other ways. So I think I would do that immediately, if not sooner.
Those are interesting propositions, really. It's just taking what it was before.
What we already had. And it's this new government has taken us back to not just the past government, but almost like decades back to the damage that's been done within the constituencies about how toxic that carbon emissions trading scheme debate got. Feels like we're miles from that, and we're actually making great progress. So I think it's going to take some time. Having said that, I think the world's economies have moved very quickly in the last 6 months. So who knows what could happen? But I think those two are really accessible policies. We've had them, and we saw changes coming as a result. Solar technology offers huge potential for jobs and regional jobs, because that's where a lot of space is to be able to have solar, solar farms, for the want of a better word. All the engineers that we need to fix the solar, to create the new technologies, solar roofs. There was endless potential, and there still is. So it's just about putting the pressure on to keep those things on track.
Claudette, what is your forecast for the future in the areas you work on? Where do you think the efforts of people will be focusing on to create bigger change in the following years?
I think climate change will become more easily discussed. It won't be such a taboo, toxic topic. I think how we source our food, grow our food. I'm trying to turn all our nature strips in my street into vegetable plots, and I'm battling with my own local council about trying to grow food in a wasted space. I think we won't be having those discussions. I think it'll be a given. Trying to make communities more involved in where they get their food from, where they get their energy from, and sharing. I think I was just in Berlin recently, and they were talking about co-ops creating and owning their own power supplies. I think that's where we'll go. I think we'll have cooperatively owned businesses where everybody gets an equal share, equal input, equal output, because I think that we don't have a choice. I think that's how we're going to have business as unusual, is that we won't get this massive disparity between the few that have everything and the majority that have nothing. I think we'll start to see those people getting activated about how they too can have a share. So it's about sharing, co-ops, but in water supplies and energy supplies and food supplies. I hope that's where we'll go, because I think that's the answer.
How do you envision your legacy?
I think the immediate legacy that I see is my own two children. So I've got a 5, or now a 6, she turned 6 yesterday, and a 4-year-old. And they're, what normally is a 10-minute walk to school turns into an hour walk, because we have to pick up all the plastic, both to and from school. So whether I like it or not, I think I've created a couple of little, hopefully they'll end up being environmentalists, but I think that's the legacy, that when you walk the walk, you can't help but impact upon those directly involved with you, and my kids are there doing their little bit, so hopefully that's that'll be a good legacy to leave behind.
It is the best. Well, thank you again for this amazing conversation and for your generosity on sharing the insights of your journey as a change maker. I wish you all the success on your current and future projects, and congratulate you for the fantastic work you're doing with the community and the planet to make it a better place. So thank you.
Thank you.